weeks. Governor Chris Christie of New Jersey actually came out and said the war on drugs has failed. He advocated taking first-time, nonviolent heroin offenders, and he's being awfully limited here, but sending them to compulsory inpatient therapy instead of prison. And his main reasoning behind it was prison costs New Jersey $49,000 a year per prisoner, rehab under $24,000 a year.
Right, that's his type compassion, I
Yeah,
suppose.
yeah.
I mean, you got to take that with a huge grain of salt, I think. Governor Chris Christie has, in times past, been more of a drug warrior, and for him to be so
Well, after all,
specific.
He's a federal prosecutor.
his main job before this was as a U.S. attorney.
Right.
So he's prosecuted a lot of drug cases.
Yeah.
And he's been very, very, very reluctant to put the New Jersey medical marijuana law into force.
So
Right.
now he's standing behind it.
Yeah, but he's now. I have to give him this. It was kind of a dirty wad of dirt on his plate. The outgoing governor signed the law, making it formal. I think the actual day before Christie took office as governor.
I believe it was.
And he approached it thinking like a lawyer and with his head still full of federal law. And he spent nearly 2 years trying to find some way to force it into a mold that to him was compatible with federal law, and it just can't be done.
No.
For instance, he went through one stage where he was insisting that Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey, be the only source that grew marijuana in the state. And that's just an absolute no-no under federal law. But
Sure.
But apparently he's worked his way through it, and Clayton, it looks like it's probably going to be in effect by the end of this year, doesn't
Oh,
it?
yes, it does. I mean, your other states, Delaware is moving on it also.
Well, yeah, but in New Jersey, it looks like that the comparison, I guess, really the nearest would be to Arizona with what the governor out there is doing.
Well, New Jersey's bill, you can't grow your own.
Okay,
You have to
yeah.
buy it.
But what I'm trying to say is you have a very authoritarian, rigid government,
Yes.
a governor who is personally really opposed to the law, trying to make it a very rigorous, rigid setup, and it's going into effect. And it looks like the same sort of thing is happening with fewer delays in Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, we have, they say, 17 states now, and
Yeah.
Washington, D.C.
yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, like you said, New Jersey has taken years to compile their plan,
Yeah.
how they're going to grow and distribute.
And we've got a couple that are basically failures like Michigan and Montana,
Right.
where they just don't seem to be able to get their act together at all.
Well, and the sad thing is, Montana in the beginning seemed to be one of the more alert, aware, compassionate, if you will, and it went forward for a year and a half, 2 years, and then suddenly the other side began to realize that they should be upset, I guess, and
No. What upset Montana legislators was these two physician's assistant that had the bus went around the country,
Oh, yeah.
and they were approving 50, 60, 100 new patients every single day.
No, but these state senators were opposed from the very beginning.
Yes, they were.
It was kind of a squeaker getting it through the legislature there, and the conservative branch of the state government has just never reconciled themselves to the existence of that law.
well, and that's,
yeah.
I think, kind of true across the board, across the country,
Yeah.
that there's a lot of people that are going to stand in opposition no matter what truths are brought forward.
But yeah, the other national statement that kind of got my attention was Nancy Pelosi, the minority leader in the House, came out and said that she thought the House would be doing something with medical marijuana just after the first of the year. Now,
Right.
she may know some things that I don't know, but it kind of surprised me that she was taking that sort of positive statement about it at this time.
Well, it was Ron Paul, I think maybe 15 years ago, said that if the U.S. Congress could vote in secret, that marijuana would have been legal back then. The fact of the matter is they don't want to appear to their constituents as being soft on crime.
Yeah.
And that's what holds it back, I think, for the most part these days.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
Montana, all those people that were delegated by the state for dispensaries and grow opportunities, they're all going to jail federally right now.
yeah.
They had 38,000 registered patients, and the state had been working hard ever since they got all those people approved to start cutting the numbers back.
Yeah.
And I think they're down to about
But
8,000.
as I say, it was mainly there a very contentious fight
Yes, it was.
within the state legislature.
Yeah.
And you've had members of that legislature that have been really pushing and pressuring the U.S. attorney to act there.
But, you know, Buford, despite the setback, if you will, in Montana and elsewhere, we do have a situation now where Oregon has become the third of these United States that will be voting for legal adult marijuana this fall.
That's the other big thing that I think is looming politically. That we now have Colorado, Washington, and Oregon, all three that have now approved legalization matters on their fall ballots.
Right, right. And I think Connecticut has something on their ballot under the scenario, something like to the effect, you can vote for this bill or this referendum, and it would then force the legislature to consider legalizing cannabis. Is that?
You know, well, the thing is, there are 50 states, and there are probably 75 different laws about how referenda work.
Right, right.
It's a mess, and it varies. But a lot of states have a system in which if a referendum passes the general vote, it doesn't go into effect until the legislature has had a chance to enact it and pass something that does more or less the same thing. And then only if the legislature fails to act does the referendum itself become law.
Okay.
And I think you've got something like that situation in Connecticut. But
Well, Connecticut has
I'm no expert on the variation of all these state laws.
Well, yeah, there's too many to keep up with.
Connecticut has a duplicate law to New Jersey. You can't grow there. You can only.
Okay, now that's on
Well, that's the medical side.
Yes.
Yeah, we're talking here about a decriminalization as well.
Yeah, legal for adults.
I want to remind everyone that this is your show. We welcome your phone calls to us. We'll put your comments or questions on the air and do our best to answer them. If you're watching us on YouTube or streaming video of some kind, you can email me at the address given and I'll reply to you, and we may use your question or comment on the next show. So please jump in and help us make it the show you want to hear.
Indeed.
So,
And on the downside, I guess, if you will, we had a situation a few months back where our good friend Richard Lee from Houston, Oaksterdam University, got raided, busted, and basically torn apart. And in the last couple of weeks, the U.S. Attorney out there has written to Harborside Health Center, the world's largest marijuana distributor, in threatening to shut them down in both their Oakland and San Jose location.
well, before we get into the details on that, I want to at least paraphrase a statement she made that really just kind of pulled my cork under. she said, I don't know that these people are doing anything criminal according to the state law or not.
Who are you speaking of here?
The U.S. attorney.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's anything criminal they're doing under the state law or not, but there is just so much money involved in this operation that there's probably something wrong somewhere.
And right, and if large is an indication of criminal, we better go look at Walmart quick. Right?
Yeah, but anyway, go ahead about the
Well, no, I was probably going to say much of what you're saying there. And the fact of the matter is that Harborside is embraced by the patients. Of over 100,000 patients come to them for their cannabis. They are embraced by the community of Oakland, which has written laws very specifically to support them, to embrace them, to help them to grow. And they have paid out millions in taxes. They are employing well over 100 people at just these two locations.
Yes.
And this is going to diminish the income. The Harborside Health Center is the second largest taxpayer in the city of Oakland.
Well, when the news of this broke, I commented to several people that this U.S. attorney is the best ally drug law reformers have, because the firestorm that's been coming out of the California newspapers, the San Francisco Chronicle, the Oakland paper, all of the big northern central California papers, the whole population is up in arms about her actions in this case.
Indeed. Well, there's an intent. President Obama is coming to Oakland, California, this coming Monday.
Yeah.
He's going to give a speech at something or another theater, which is about a block and a half from the headquarters of Oaksterdam University. And I'll be interviewing Steve D'Angelo, the president of Harborside, this coming Sunday about this.
Yeah.
But the following morning, Obama is coming to Oakland, Oaksterdam.
Yeah.
And they intend to have a massive protest to show him their displeasure at what his U.S. attorneys are doing there.
Yeah. Well, it's not just the U.S. attorneys and the DEA. This is why I've been saying for some time that reform at the state level just really doesn't work. What Harborside is running into is that the Internal Revenue Code was written with Al Capone in mind.
RICO, yeah.
And while you're forced to report any illegal income as taxable income, you're not allowed to deduct any reasonable business expenses, and you're taxed as if everything you brought in is sheer profit. The rationale was that a bank robber shouldn't get a tax deduction for his bullets. So this means that anything that Harborside, for instance, takes in, they're not allowed to deduct the cost of the goods that they buy, the labor they pay for, their lease payments, their utilities.
Their employees'
None of
salary.
those are deductible under the tax laws as it now stands. The second thing that's happening here is that the U.S. attorneys are informing the property owners, the people that own the buildings that Harborside and Richard and others leased, that since they know about illegal under federal law operations going on their property, that their property is subject to civil forfeiture under the continuing criminal enterprise laws. Now, this is particularly devastating because under those laws, the federal government can take the property if they have a reasonable suspicion that it was acquired by or used for an illegal activity. Then if the owner wants to get the property back, he has to bring suit as a civil suit against the U.S. government, and he then has the burden of proving that he is an innocent owner
Right.
who did not know what was going on his property and could not have done anything to prevent it. The
Yeah.
third thing we look at, and the Colorado people have run into this a lot, the federal government has notified banks that if they allow medical marijuana places to have checking accounts, then they are probably guilty of money laundering crimes, and the banks can be subject to criminal penalties. Let's see what our caller has to say.
Wonderful.
Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Okay. Yeah, this is Dean. I wanted to know how y'all felt about the drug problem in Mexico
Okay.
and also along the Texas border.
Okay, that's a good question.
Is that Mr. Schiller?
I'm sorry?
Mr. Schiller?
Hello?
Hello, is this Dane Schiller?
This is Dean.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that's the one I'm thinking of. Dane Schiller has a column in the Houston Chronicle, the
Yeah.
Narco Confidential, I believe it is, that
Right.
focuses very seriously on the problems on the border area and the problems in
Yeah.
Mexico, South Texas.
Yeah.
And boy, what do I think? I think it's a total fiasco. I think we have lost our way. I think politicians are seeking votes instead of progress. I think we have a situation wherein, thank God the Chronicle and many others these days are beginning to bring forward these truths that people should recognize.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, I hear 50,000, 60,000, 70,000 dead in Mexico in the last 5.5 years. And for what? What has been the benefit? What did we get out of it? What did the Mexicans get out of it? And there is no benefit to be recognized.
I can tell you one thing that's fairly certain about it. The availability of drugs on the American streets has not changed one little bit.
Nope.
And
Yes,
the
it has.
price
It's gotten
of
easier.
them, if anything, is lower than it's been before. What we have not realized coke should sell for about a nickel a gram instead of what, $100 a gram now?
Or 50 and up, but yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. That price differential caused by the Prohibition law is what the fighting is about in Mexico. It right now is probably the second largest foreign exchange earning part of the Mexican economy. I've heard estimates $30 billion a year is a good middle figure.
I've heard 50, but yeah.
Yeah.
It's,
At least
knows?
90% of that $30 billion is the price inflation caused by it being against the law in the United States. And if you took 90% of that 30 or $50 billion out of the drug war, first, there wouldn't be any money to buy bullets to shoot people with, and second, there wouldn't be anything left to fight for.
right.
If marijuana sold at the same price as broccoli, and they're about the same kind of crop, nobody would shoot to see who got the chance to sell it.
No.
I never in my life saw two broccoli dealers turn machine guns on each other.
It'd be rare. It'd be very rare.
That's my view of the mess in Mexico. Let's take a break, and then we'll let Dean respond to what's going on in Mexico.
Fair enough.
some brilliant entrepreneurs came up with the idea of blocking the endocannabinoids in our body to create a new diet drug. The theory being, if cannabis gives people the munchies, then blocking the endocannabinoids would make them lose their appetites. The drug they developed, Ramonabant, did indeed reduce appetite by blocking the endocannabinoid receptors. But data from clinical trials showed that Ramonabant users suffered depression, anxiety, insomnia, and aggressive impulses at twice the rate of subjects given a placebo.
Well, Sanofi-Aventis, the company that had developed and was marketing this agent, did not study people with a history of psychiatric illness or depression before they applied for approval. That was probably a mistake. The EMA did approve it, and the drug's been on the market in Europe for a year and a half by now. And I've sort of said, if there was any real problem with this that was more than just theoretical, we would know. Well, it turns out we do know. And they've suggested now that the risk for this agent outweighs the benefit.
In one study, there were 5 suicides among Ramonabant users because, as they discovered, endocannabinoids are also mood regulators with the capacity to make us feel euphoric or, when blocked, depressed. Ramonabant was finally withdrawn from the market in 2008. Researchers at the MD Anderson Cancer Center in Texas reported that mice on Ramonabant developed potentially cancerous polyps at a far higher rate than controls, confirming that endocannabinoids are not only mood regulators, but tumor regulators as well.
Welcome back to Drugs, Crime, and Politics. We were talking about the drug war in Mexico, but in August, Dean, we've got an event coming up that will appear here locally on August the 26th, but it's going to involve you for at least 2 weeks. Tell us a little bit about the Peace Caravan against the drug war.
Well, that's a major event. It's going to be 25 cities in 30 days, starting in, well, they're going to come across from Tijuana into San Diego.
Okay.
They're going to go to Los Angeles, Tucson, Phoenix, get into Texas, El Paso, Laredo, Houston, McAllen, San Antonio, Austin, go over to New Orleans, I don't know, Memphis, Chicago, up through New York, and Baltimore, down to D.C. And the focus of this is, the reason for this was brought about by the works of Mexican poet Javier Sicilia, who's read 3 or 4 similar caravans in Mexico to bring attention to this need to re-examine what's going on, to find a better way to handle the problem of drugs. And, you know, there will be the contingent. I think there's going to be 80 people from Mexico traveling with Javier. There's going to be representatives of the NAACP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, and many other organizations around the country will be participating in this event. It is my goal, my intent, to be with it from San Antonio all the way through. Maybe I'll stop in Houston, or maybe I'll continue on to Washington, D.C. But
either way, we should be able to hear quite a bit about it on your radio show.
We will indeed. I will be garnering interviews. Like I said, for this coming Sunday, I mentioned I'll have Steve D'Angelo on. I'm also going to have the wife of a Canadian who is now in prison here in the United States. He's been there for 2.5 years. He's got about Mark Emery.
Yeah.
His wife Jody will be my guest, and you know, it's folks like Mark Emery who stood forth, who sold seeds, marijuana seeds, to individuals around the world. Because he sold some in the United States, we found him guilty, even though he had never stepped foot in our country. We found him guilty of drug charges and convinced the Canadian government to hand him over to us to be locked up.
And with his wife living in Canada.
Vancouver.
The Federal Bureau of Prisons decided the most appropriate place to put him was in Mississippi, right?
Yeah, some 3,000 miles away. But that's what I was going to say, is that, you know, Mark represents, he made millions of dollars and gave away those millions of dollars to reformers around the country and around the world, so that they could better educate their fellow citizens, so that they could help bring about these changes. And I think it was that work, that mindset of Mark Emery, which caused him to be convicted more than in the sales of marijuana seeds.
I think also he was to some extent responsible for Canada as a nation legalizing medical marijuana.
Right.
In fact, the federal government there actually grows the medical marijuana for the country.
Yeah, and he stood forth. He stood forth boldly enough that there was no one willing to challenge his, quote, expertise. And we are beginning to reach that plateau here in these United States, where there are fewer and fewer politicians. You know, Representative Wolf was, I think, arguing for marijuana criminality a few weeks back when Michelle Linhart, the head of the DEA, came before the U.S. Congress.
Oh, and let me interrupt here and urge everyone to go to YouTube or C-SPAN or wherever it is and look at Linhart's miserable performance in front of Congress. I mean,
against Representative Jarris, was that his name?
I believe so.
But she, yes, please, folks, she shows the ignorance, and whether it's feigned or real.
Oh, complete, utter refusal to even discuss the issues.
Yeah, just all drugs are bad, and wanted to leave it right there. They were trying to get her to say, was marijuana as dangerous as heroin? Is marijuana as dangerous as crack cocaine?
And
she
her response always, all illegal drugs are bad.
Right. Yeah. So there's just one size stick with which to. Yeah. One more thought, getting back to the situation revolving around the Caravan for Peace.
Yeah.
This is going to be an opportunity. I've been promoting this for more than a month on my radio shows, just to try to alert people to the fact. It will be here August 28th, you said, in Houston?
August 26th.
August 26th in Houston.
And it will be here probably from noon until late that afternoon, and they're planning at least a couple of public events.
Right.
They're still trying to lock down the venues for them, but.
Right, and this will be your opportunity, folks. I mean, the plain fact is, I believe, well, no, I don't just believe, there have been polls of late showing that Americans, 52% are for legal cannabis, marijuana, as we speak. And the fact of the matter is that of that 52%, there's so few that are able to speak about their observation, their understanding at work, at a job, in church, anywhere, because they don't want to be seen as for crack machines in the junior high, which, you know, that's the old attitude we've often spoken of, that people just don't want to be seen as.
Well, the system that we use now allows kids to get whatever they want when they want. There's nobody there to tell a dealer, no, you can't sell to that young kid.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things, and this is held true almost for the entire 40 years that the government has sponsored the monitoring
The future
surveys each year, that consistently during that whole period of time, teenagers have responded that marijuana is easier for them to get than either alcohol or tobacco.
Yes.
You know, drug dealers don't check IDs.
No. All they check is to make sure you get the cash.
So.
And to see if maybe you want to try something harder.
And guess what? They didn't have any lab check the purity of their stuff before they sold it.
No. And that's, you know, the fact of the matter is, you often hear DEA found kilos of pure cocaine. That stuff's not pure. I don't care if it was just made and shipped here today. That's at best 92%.
Yeah.
There's still residual kerosene and acetone and other, well, it could be foot fungus, because they stomp those coca leaves with their feet to start with. You don't know what's in there. Pure, no way. It never has been. Not since Merck quit. Well, Merck still makes it. They just don't sell it to us.
Well, actually, we do still have legal cocaine in this country. Doctors do use it, particularly on some eye, nose, and throat procedures.
Sure, dentistry still.
But all of the legal cocaine in the United States now comes from one company. Do you know what company that is?
I don't.
Oh, I don't remember the name of it. But they're the company that imports the raw coca leaves from South America, removes the cocaine from them,
Oh,
gives the decoconized leaves to Coca-Cola for flavoring Coke,
yeah.
and then sells the Coke they took out of the leaves to American doctors.
Isn't that something? Stop and think about it, folks. Where did that name Coca-Cola come from? In the
That
beginning,
was the
it
two
had
main ingredients, the coca from the coca leaf and cola nuts from the cola tree.
right. And back when it had the actual cocaine alkaloids in it, it was an actual
Well,
high.
It started out, John Pemberton, the pharmacist, started out making a coca fortified wine. He was copying the Vin Mariani, which was a fortified wine with cocaine added to it.
Favored by the Pope, if I
And
remember.
he used pure cocaine. He didn't use coca leaves.
Yeah.
He got personal endorsements from Thomas Edison. He got a letter of commendation from the Pope. John Pemberton copied this. But he was in Atlanta, Georgia. And in the 1880s, the state of Georgia went prohibitionist, voted to outlaw all alcohol. So John Pemberton quit making his coca fortified wine and came out with a non-alcoholic tonic instead. And the result is Coca-Cola.
Some $100 billion later. Yeah.
And there's a funny footnote to that story. Recently, the coca growers in Bolivia, where it's recognized as an acceptable part of the native culture.
Sacrament, heck, it's...
Yeah. They have been trying to get the government in Bolivia to make Coca-Cola quit using that name because they say it's misleading and deceptive to the public. Because Coke is selling a product in Bolivia that has no coca in it.
Well, that's true. You know, I was in Bolivia, I guess 7 years ago, and every person I met, from the justice minister, I met a Christian minister, I met prison guards and prisoners, cops, and every person I met had a big wad of coca in their cheek and chewing it. It was not considered evil, wrong. It was just part of their lives.
And if you look at the international treaties, the Single Convention on Narcotics, which is the main standard one, there was an exception written into that for traditional use by indigenous people of non-processed drugs.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, by the way, I bought a half pound of coca leaf
yeah.
for $1.
Okay. Well, a half pound of coca leaves, as I understand, the normal coca leaf has about 1% cocaine in it.
Yeah.
So a half pound would be about 0.005 pounds. And I'm not going to do the math to convert that
Okay,
to grams.
there'd be 224.5 pounds. Divide that by 100, 2 grams.
Okay.
2 grams of cocaine in that $1 purchase. So, and I got the gringo price, you know. So I'm sure, it matches up with your low estimate of the cost of a gram.
So,
But can I bring up something?
Yeah.
This is something that I feel moms and dads need to be aware of out there. That over the last generation, the last 20 to 30 years, there's been a gradual change in, I won't say the intellect, but in the attitude and endeavors of young males. And that leads me to this book. I interviewed the author of this book, Swagger. It's by Lisa Bloom. You've probably seen her on MSNBC, The Early Show, The Late Show, Dr. Phil. She's been on thousands of radio and TV shows. And Swagger, 10 Urgent Rules for Raising Boys in an Era of Failing Schools, Mass Joblessness, and Thug Culture. And what we have done over the last generation is to take away our focus from education.
Yeah.
Is to parents being distracted by jobs and works and other obligations, and they're not taking the time to work with their kids on homework.
Yeah.
And young males have been, for lack of a better word, demonized by teachers and principals for being unruly and did we have a call?
Okay, let's take a call.
We'll
and
come back to this,
okay.
but go ahead.
Thought we had a call, but the phone doesn't seem to be working.
See if it works. There we go.
There we go.
All right, please call us back if you did. We're sorry.
Okay.
Punched the wrong button. Anyway, getting back to this book, Swagger, what it's telling us is that males have lost their stature. Back when we were in school, you know, the males and the females were pretty much equal in intellect and reading, and males seem to have the advantage in math and science and, you know, geometry, that kind of thing. But what's happened in the last 20, 30 years is that males have come down on their scores, females have come up, and now females are at an advantage, especially in reading. Reading has been turned into a girly occupation by the mindset of modern males, for the most part. And the girls have now taken over insofar as math and science as well. And what we've done is relegated males to, I won't say second-class status, but we have not given them the focus, the attention, the education that they need in order to thrive. We have this drug war, which has come along with this enticement towards, quote, manliness. You can get your stature, your bling, your girls by selling and dealing in drugs. And of course, once that person is caught and convicted, they lose their ability to get a real job, to actually make progress in this world. So what we've done is given short shrift to young males, and that's the nature of this book, Swagger. I urge you to please check out my most recent cultural baggage show at drugtruth.net. There's a great interview there with Lisa Bloom. I think you'll really enjoy it. And a side note, on that same thought, 2 days ago, the Washington Post had an article by Touré, I guess that's how you say it.
Touré, yes.
Touré, which follows much in the same line as this book, Swagger, by Lisa Bloom. It's how America and hip-hop failed each other. And this is we have spent so much time chasing down the drug users that we have failed to deal with all the other myriad problems that we have in America, and therefore we've, you know, the males are losing ground.
Well, I would probably quarrel with some of the social numbers behind this. I think that, and Touré especially is very, very targeted in who he's looking at. But one of the problems that I've seen for a long time is that in particularly inner city neighborhoods, economically disadvantaged neighborhoods, a young man is quite likely to grow up without seeing a single adult male that he knows who has a regular job of any kind.
Yeah.
The only people he sees that have any kind of success at all are the guys on the street corner with the bling and the big cars. The only route to success he sees is to leave school at 13 or 14 and start hustling on the street corner.
Yep.
Now, there is a failure there, but I'm not sure that it's that easy to explain. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Hello?
Hi,
Yes, go ahead.
earlier you say Lyft, that pharmaceutical company, Merck, is allowed to legally sell cocaine in the United States. But you also seemed unhappy that most people, especially young people, get marijuana from drug dealers. So it seems like either a corporation has to sell it when it's legalized, or a dealer does. What's the solution to that contradiction?
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm not sure there's a contradiction there.
The one thing I would say, insofar as cocaine, I was talking about earlier, the best we've
Yeah.
ever seen is 92% coming up from Colombia or,
Yeah,
or wherever.
I mean-
I'd prefer that Merck or Pfizer or somebody
Yeah.
with the skills make it.
Yeah.
Insofar as cannabis, I envision once it's legal, it will be in the 7-Elevens and the Safeway stores.
Yeah.
But I think eventually it will be in my backyard and your backyard, and we will just trade.
It won't be in mine.
Well,
The one time in my whole life I tried to grow a house plant, it turned brown and went away within a month's time. But yeah, I don't see anything wrong with going to your local Walgreen or even supermarket and even showing an ID, showing you're old enough to buy your marijuana. I think it should be grown by regular commercial farmers following the rules, just like cotton or broccoli or wheat is grown.
Should allow individuals to grow it also.
Oh yeah, there's nothing wrong. You can grow your own potatoes now if you want to.
Yeah.
Let's take a break and we'll come back in just a minute.
fair enough.
The whole idea of a drug-free America and zero tolerance really doesn't make much sense, does it? So it does make sense, however, to find ways to reduce the harms associated with drugs. And that's what I want to talk about.
Better start thinking about whether it is really laws that make the difference on whether people use drugs or not.
Al Capone didn't shoot people because he was intoxicated.
Right, exactly.
Those people are not fighting over drugs, they're fighting over money.
Drug laws have no basis in science. Drug laws are based on politics and money.
So there's this unholy symbiosis between, on the one hand, those who are selling illegal drugs, the drug lords, if you will, and on the other side, the drug warriors.
War on drugs isn't working, and that, if anything, is just making what we call the drug problem a lot worse.
I remember just going in, taking a small area of my community and for all practical purposes, cordoning it off, completely cleaning it up, using some pretty sophisticated techniques, trampling all over the edges of the Constitution to do so. But I mean, really cleaning it up and getting all of the dope dealers out of there. And to my dismay, 90 days later, I had a Haitian group to move in from downstate. I had the Miami boys to move in from Jacksonville, and they were shooting machine guns and beating people mercilessly, and I wanted my old dope dealers back.
Welcome back to Drugs, Crime, and Politics. Tonight we're with Clayton Jones and Dean Becker, and we've been talking about everything in the whole world tonight.
We have. I had a couple of points I wanted to talk about if we can. One is you guys saw the op-ed in the New York Times back in May from the judge that.
Yeah, the judge that was using medical marijuana himself, and he
Right.
just stepped down from the bench at the time.
Judge Justin L. Reinbach, he was a justice of the state Supreme Court of New York.
Yeah.
And he wrote this back.
Okay, now let me footnote.
Yeah.
The state Supreme Court of New York is not a state Supreme Court. That's the
you
Court
got
of
me there. What?
Appeals. The Supreme Court in New York State is like a district court in Texas.
Okay.
It's the general level trial court.
Okay.
So, yeah.
But could I read just a little
Yeah.
bit? This is, we hope for the day when more healthy, long-term live judges stand forward and say these sort of things. But I'll just read a bit. Given my position as a sitting judge still hearing cases, well-meaning friends question the wisdom of my coming out on this issue, but I recognize that fellow cancer sufferers may be unable, for a host of reasons, to give voice to our plight. It is another heartbreaking aporia in the world of cancer that the one drug that gives relief without deleterious side effects remains classified as a narcotic with no medicinal value.
Yeah.
That's speaking from the heart there, isn't it?
Yeah.
And
I think you were telling me he died 2 days ago.
he died 2 days ago. And if only other, well, we do have one judge, my favorite judge, Judge James P. Gray, the vice presidential, libertarian vice presidential candidate for president.
Well, I was...
Judge McSpadden right here in Houston, he's against the drug laws.
No, okay. I agree.
We have several judges right here in our own community that do stand up and say, speak out.
Yeah.
They all signed a letter at last legislative session.
But this brings us back to something we were talking about before the show. Judges in Texas, especially judges in Harris County, right?
Yeah. And part of the problem is that judges in Texas are elected. That's not necessarily bad. I shiver to think what kind of judges some of our governors might have appointed had they had that power.
Ooh, yeah.
But the problem is the political context of recent years have been that most people running for judicial office in this state have been afraid to be anything other than tough on crime. And they're always thinking of the next election when a case comes in front of them for sentencing, when someone's arrested and comes in front of them for bond setting. And if that judge is worried about what's it going to make him look like at the polls in 4 years, damn it, he's got no business being on that bench.
Right, yeah. He needs to have today's judgment. He's got to have that scale
And
working now.
It's just like those people in Congress. No one should plan on making a career out of Congress. We have had some outstanding legislators and judges, by the way, that have been elected and stayed in office for 50 years, and I applaud them for it. But if you run for office, and I'm going to sound like Pollyanna here, your goal should be to do the best thing possible, and then at the next election, go back to being a barber or an insurance salesman or whatever else it was.
Yeah.
Do not go seeking elective office for the purpose of making a career out of it. Because the minute you do that, you've sold out and you're not doing your best to represent the country.
Can I bring this back again to the judges here in Harris County? What you were just saying about making it a cycle to be reelected, that is what is happening here. The judges, especially in Harris County, depend on the bail bondsmen for their campaign contributions, which helps them to get reelected. So when the time comes that someone comes in on a small charge, misdemeanor marijuana, whatever, the judges refuse to grant that bond, and therefore the PR bond, therefore you have to go to the bail bondsman. Helps keep the cycle going.
We have another call.
Oh.
Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Hello. I agree with you about politicians and doing the right thing and not just trying to make a career out of it. But just recently I heard on the news that there was a man where the jury said that this is an unlawful punishment over a half a gram of coke. Was that in Texas? And so the jury let him go.
That was right here in Houston.
Okay.
Yes, that's right, ma'am. Thank you. No, good point. Go ahead, Clay.
Yeah, well, the man was lived in right north of us, Woodlands. Woodlands. He was caught with a half a gram of cocaine. Spent a couple of days in jail. He pleaded not guilty, trial by jury. And it took 130 jurists to find 12 to put him on trial. And the 12 said, I'm sorry, we're not going to ruin his life over a half a gram of cocaine.
You know, Clayton, I've probably told the story too many times. But when I first started practicing law in 1970, possession of any usable amount of marijuana, which was construed as being a couple of seeds, was a felony and could get a minimum of 2 years in prison. In Lubbock in 1970, which was then, as it is now, one of the most conservative parts of the state, judges were routinely having to call panels of 120 to 150 people to get juries willing to try a felony marijuana case. And in 1974, the legislature reduced possession to a misdemeanor. Now, juries have the absolute right to vote their conscience on what they think the law means. I don't condone juries acquitting just because they want to acquit, simply because I saw too much of what happened in Mississippi and Alabama in the 1960s.
Good point.
But I do know this: if you're called as of an Ironman on a panel, and it's a simple marijuana or cocaine possession case, and if they ask you, is there any reason why you can't be fair in this case? You can say, Judge, I simply cannot send a man to prison for a half a gram of cocaine, and you end up with what Clayton talked about, having to call 130 people and then still can't get
enough to
convict a judgment. And when that starts happening on a daily basis, the rules and the law change.
Isn't that what happened with alcohol prohibition? That same scenario developed where people
to some
said,
extent,
it's what I do, I can't convict on what I do. We had a situation, you're talking about Midland, Odessa a minute ago.
Yeah.
I think it was Midland or Odessa about a year ago. Jeff Blackburn, attorney, had a trial where on a marijuana charge, and the jury, failed to convict.
That man had HIV, AIDS.
Okay, so they had a medical.
He had a medical.
There have been at least 3 cases I know of in Texas where it's gone to the jury on the question of legal necessity as a defense because someone needed marijuana for medicine. And a judge should give that as an instruction. A jury can consider it, but it's not widespread. We're about out of time.
Shoot.
Dean, tell us where we can find you on the radio, and then if each of you has a last thing to say.
Well, I look at it like this. You guys know that I've basically devoted my life to this, the last 10 and a half, 11 years, to trying to educate and motivate people, to get them to realize there is no benefit to this drug war. I have challenged everyone from the drug czar, UN drug czar, head of the DEA, any and everybody who thinks this is a good policy to come on my shows to defend this policy. No one has ever deemed to do it. I don't think anyone ever will. And we were talking about more than 50% of us now believe marijuana should be legal. That means you out there, more than 50% of you watching know that to be true. You need to do something about it. You need to speak a little louder. You need to stand and be counted, as Clay says. And with that in mind, there are hundreds of my shows. We just passed 4,200 radio segments on my website. You can access right now at drugtruth.net. Most recently, we interviewed Lisa Bloom, author of Swagger. Please check it out. We also had a show that was focused on marijuana with Paul Armentano and many others talking about this. We had reports from the NAACP convention. The truth is there. We need to put it to good, better work.
Okay, now where is your show on the radio and when?
Okay, this coming Sunday night, I'll be interviewing Steve D'Angelo, president of Harborside Health Center, at 6:30 p.m. Central Time. And at 7, we'll be interviewing Jody Emery, wife of Mark, head of Cannabis Culture magazine.
And on what station?
And that's on KPFT, which is 90.1 FM, 6:30, 7:30 p.m. This coming Sunday. Please check it out.
Okay.
And I want to tell everybody that we do need to put the pressure on our elected officials. You need to contact them and tell them how you feel about our situation with marijuana, that if they aren't in favor of it, we won't vote for them.
This last month, and I don't remember, we celebrated the 100th birthday of Woody Guthrie.
Yeah, just a couple of days ago.
Woody Guthrie may have been one of the best American songwriters and commentators that ever was. In his Talkin' Dust Bowl Blues from the 1930s, he talks about eating soup that was so thin that even a congressperson could see through it. Now, that's about my opinion of most politicians. But the main thing to remember, you hired them, it's up to you to control them. You've got to remind them that you're the boss, but the only way they can do what you want is if you tell them what it is, and you've got to tell them in a way that's clear enough that even a congressman can see through it and get the message. And remember, on August the 26th, the Caravan Against the Drug War will be here. Listen to Dean's show, look at the Houston Normal and Dean's web pages to get more information. And we'll be back to see you in about 2 weeks. Thank you, and keep the cards and letters rolling to your representatives.
Thank you, Buford.
Okay. It's been a pleasure, as usual, gentlemen. It seems like time just flies when we get together.
We need a 2-hour program, or at least something twice a week. There's enough going on all over the country that we could go twice a week and not cover the same things twice.
When I began my radio shows 10 years ago, it was the only thing on the air. Nowadays, other broadcasters, other media is beginning to speak about it. They still can't say it like I do. But fact of the matter is, we control the truth in this regard. The other side hides like skinny lion weasels.
Well, I have been surprised over the last 6 months to see how the major network news outlets have started picking up on it.
Oh, you can't go a day without seeing something on one of the stations.
Yeah. So we will leave and see you later.
Peace out.
We have these private prisons that have now hired lobbyists to go get minimum mandatories in you.
I began to understand that the 17 or the 19-year-old kid I had in the backseat of my police car was not a criminal at all.
Remove the profit motive. If you remove the profit motive, you can do away with almost all these problems. And how do you do that? Simple. You end prohibition, which can only mean one thing. Legalize drugs. Legalize all drugs.
If we really want to improve our urban neighborhoods, the most important thing that we could do, the single most important thing that we could do, is end the war on drugs.